My name's Ferguson. I'm Secretary of Dorset Palestine Solidarity Campaign. First thing, I want to thank every single one of you for being here today. This is important, and we're going to be here again alongside hundreds of thousands of people across Britain who are going to be marching week after week until we get a ceasefire and until we tear up the root of the genocide and the war. That's why we're here today, that's why it's important. Eton Mission Systems, as Joe has described, make the parts for the Sikorsky Black Hawk helicopter, the Lockheed Martin C-130, the Sikorsky CH-53 helicopter, all used in the mass targeting and killing of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. 26,000 officially, including 10,000 children, have been killed in the Israeli onslaught on the people of Gaza. A further 8,000 at least are missing, buried under the rubble. 85% of the population are displaced, 1.7 million people. The United Nations have effectively declared famine conditions in Gaza. And we've seen the IDF systematically and deliberately target civilians, hospitals, water supplies, bakeries, schools, mosques, universities, churches. 2/3 of the buildings in North Gaza destroyed or damaged, 33% across the Gaza Strip. Eton Mission Systems are profiting from genocide. As Lynn said, this is not about the workforce per se. Their skills could be used. One thing they could be used for is to help rebuild Gaza, let alone all the other uses those skills could be put to. But the question really is raised by the International Court of Justice ruling yesterday. You see, on one level, that ruling has enraged Israel. It also sends a message to millions of people who protested against the genocide in Gaza that they're right. But at the same time, it leaves Israel free to continue with the genocide and to continue with the massacres. And we know, and why is that? Because to have ruled in favour of South Africa's argument for an immediate ceasefire, it would have had to be enforced. To enforce it, that would have required a Security Council ruling. That would have put America, Britain, the European powers absolutely exposed, because they would have vetoed it and stained themselves with the mark of the genocidal attacks by Israel. And what has been the response yesterday and today? The US, Britain, Europe have suspended their financing of the UN Refugee Organization. That's the response to the ruling from the ICJ.
Shame on them, shame on them.
Our governments are arming the genocide. US bombs, some of them 2,000 pounders, are being used in Gaza as we speak. Every single one of the 72 licenses that Eton Mission Systems applied for to supply arms to Israel has been agreed. Why is it? I'll say this, you see. It's because Israel is as vital to these powers, to our governments, to these imperialist powers. It's a fortress of imperialist interests in the Middle East. Israel is an apartheid state. It's a settler colonial state. And no settler colonial state in history has ever dissolved itself. That's why it's important to the US and to Britain. And unfortunately, we can't, I believe, look to the Arab rulers either. You see, people sometimes ask, don't they, why don't the Arab governments step in? Maybe they could use their armies, their air forces, and so on, to hold off and defend Gaza and the Palestinians. Well, I tell you, I don't think it'd even take that. Do you remember, during COVID, the evergreen container ship skewed across the Suez Canal and world trade ground to a halt? Egypt could block the Suez Canal. Look what the Houthis are doing in the Red Sea. What could the Arab governments do there? So I don't believe we can look to the Arab governments. And to go from the sublime to the ridiculous, I don't believe anyone here for a moment thinks that if Keir Starmer wins an election and we have a Labour government, that they will bring any justice for the Palestinians. It's shameful, shameful that Keir Starmer and the front bench won't even call for a ceasefire.
Shame on
Absolute shame. And don't give me all these weasel words and formulations. Sustainable ceasefire. What they mean is only sustainable when Israel agrees to it and has finished its business in attacking Gaza. So the answer lies, and this is where I began. The answer lies with the mass movement that's exploded onto the streets here in Britain and across the world. And you know, sometimes people ask, understandably, are the marches of hundreds of thousands of people every fortnight, they're fantastic, but are they enough? No. So they say, will it bring a result? Will it change anything? I think that's a bit the wrong question. The question isn't, are they enough? The question is, where do they need to lead to? Because I can't think of a mass movement that's brought change. The anti-Vietnam War movement, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, for civil rights in the United States, the anti-colonial movements, French Algiers. I can't think of one that hasn't begun with mass demonstrations of people on the streets. Because they bring together, they give the confidence, and this is what's important. Where do those demonstrations lead? I think they have to lead to a number of things. More militancy, more radicalism. If they won't shut it down, we need to shut it down. We need the occupation of stations. We need the occupations that we've seen. We need the militancy on the streets. We need the radicalism. And we need to build towards shutting the system down. And we may think that seems like a big ask. But I tell you one thing. They're not stopping, are they? War really now threatens across the region in the Middle East. Look at Yemen. Look at the instability. That's going to affect millions of people. We need to go back into our workplaces, into our colleges, into our universities and communities. And we need to argue and persuade, but above all, we need to bring more people into the fight. And I want a ceasefire. Of course we want a ceasefire. But to get it, I believe we're going to need revolt and resistance. I support the resistance of the Palestinians. I support the resistance of people like the Houthis. Because we need to get to the root of the genocide. to the existence of a state founded on dispossession, on the Nakba, and on racism. My mother's family had family members who perished in the Holocaust in Hungary. Today is Holocaust Memorial Day. I'll say this as a Jew. Two things. One, the lesson I draw from the Holocaust is this. I don't support the Palestinians in spite of the Holocaust. I support the Palestinians because of the Holocaust. Because the lesson of the Holocaust for me is this. Whatever your religion, whatever your politics, whatever your race, your background, you always stand with the oppressed. You always stand with the oppressed against the oppressor. And I believe that cry we've shouted today, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That cry is a cry of freedom. It's a cry of freedom, of course, above all, for the Palestinians. But why are millions across the world responding to it? Because they feel in their hearts it's a cry of freedom for them, for a world without racism, oppression, war, the rise of fascism, Islamophobia and the far right. So that cry, for me, is a cry of revolutionary vision of a different world. So Eton, we will be back. We're going to build our movement. We are going to fight for Palestine to be free across the Middle East, in Palestine itself, from the river to the sea and here. And we're going to fight here, in the heart of the beast, in Britain, in the US, the biggest military powers in history. We are going to fight here to shut them down. Free, free.